So once again, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, for the virtual chapter for August 2020. It's good to be here with you tonight. And I am Michael Watson. I'm here with my co-host, Karen Hand. Say hello. It's great to see you, Karen, in the windy city of Chicago.
Boy, it was this week.
We're glad you've weathered the storm nicely. So we've got a little bit of a change of format, but let's just make a couple quick, last minute quick announcements that we need to make to remind everybody about things that are going on and what they need to know here. CEUs, for example.
CEUs are available.
Tell them about that, Karen.
You can get CEUs for joining us here tonight. You can get them at IACT IMDHA. All you have to do is sign on and tell them that you spent this time with us, and they'll be glad to reward you with CEUs for this venture. And if you're watching the recording, you can also do that. That counts. So get your CEUs from IACT, IMDHA, and other friendly organizations. Tell them that you were here.
All right. Okay, and with that said, now we've got a few announcements. First of all, this weekend, of course, some people are traveling out to Las Vegas for Hypno Thoughts Live, the annual event out there. That will be interesting to hear. I don't know all the details, but I know it's a little bit back that there is that there are live presentations and that there are online presentations, and they seem to have put that together pretty nicely. So we wish them all the best of luck with that. Karen, are you presenting out there? Are you not?
I am not presenting out there, but I have presentations on the streaming event. Yeah.
Okay. So everybody, check out Hypno Thoughts Live,
we're keeping our fingers crossed that Mid-America will be an all Zoom conference in October. I got some great valuable help from Linda, Otto, and we're hoping, and we're still working out the details, but I think Mid-America in October will be an all Zoom conference this time, so that overseas people can still join us, and people can, everybody, locals can still join us.
And by the way, the NATH in Virginia Beach in November is going to be a virtual conference as well. And the Hypnosis Education Association here in Florida, the weekend after that in November, is also going to be all online this particular go round. And gosh, let's hope for some good things for next year so that we can all get back together, because I'm looking forward to seeing Robert, Otto, and the gang here in my hometown in Orlando. Yeah. So let's put out all the good energy that we can and get this situation resolved. There is something I want to let you guys know about, and that is that Zoom has continues to make changes in their security procedures and stuff. And beginning on some date in the middle of September, I'm not sure exactly what it is, like the 23rd or 27th or so, they're going to require all meetings have either a passcode or send people to a waiting room before they log on. So instead of just clicking the link and coming in here like you have been, their new policy would require you to enter a passcode. There is, as I understand it, though, a procedure that you can have and I've tested it out, in fact, that you can have the passcode embedded in the link. So it may be just exactly what you've been doing before. That is, you'll just click the link and it'll take you here and it'll send the code and everything. It won't really feel any different for you, except it will be a different link than the one that you have now. So when we make that change, of course, we'll announce it in the virtual chapter Facebook group. We'll announce it everywhere that we can so that you know what the new link is. And I know that Linda will send it out in the chapter chit chat to the IACT and IMDHA people as well. So we'll make sure that you have that beforehand, but do be aware of the meeting after the next one. It'll be the October meeting. The link to log into this group will probably be changed. So that's all I have to say about that.
Well, there you go.
You got anything else before we?
I have a certification, IACT certification beginning in October. It will be all online probably, although we'll try to do some in-person stuff if we can, depending on what COVID lets us do. But that starts in October, so if you know somebody who's ready to be a certified hypnotist, let them know that I started class in October.
And by the way, how could I let this go by without telling you that the last weekend of this month is the IACT Certified Stress Management Consultant training that I will be running, and it's Saturday and Sunday online and offered through Zoom. And you can contact the association if you have an interest in that, or check it out at their website. looks like it's been going to be pretty groovy, and we've got a great bunch of people involved with it. So
Yeah.
thrilled about that. So isn't that cool? We get to start out. We get to start out being thrilled, and it can just go uphill from here, right?
That's absolutely right tonight.
So you might remember, Karen, we started out a long time ago with an hour-long program, and it seemed that sometimes, and particularly when we're doing the presenter series, we need a little bit more time than that. So everybody might remember, it's now been a couple of years, of course, but we expanded to this 90-minute format. And now we started thinking, wouldn't it be nice to be able, rather than just what all the other groups do, to be able to offer our folks a couple of things in the course of a 90-minute evening with us. And so we've added on a new feature called Take One, or Act One, rather. I think that's what I'm going to call it. I'm making up the name right now. And it is either Act or Take One.
We'll let you know.
I'll let you know. But yeah, so we can take some time at the beginning of the show, either to talk about a particular technique or something that people had expressed an interest in, or questions that had come up during the month, or that we can highlight a person in some of the organizations, or and introduce them to the group, stuff like that. And we are beginning that process tonight. So in a little while, by the way, I guess, good. Jess, I'm so glad to know that you're here. I just can't see your picture, and I was a little concerned. So we're going to be talking to Jess Marion a little bit later, and I know some of you are aware of that. But for our Act One segment, we have a very special guest to kick this feature off. And Karen, would you be so kind as to make the introduction?
Well, I absolutely would. This is a person who really doesn't need an introduction. And I hate it when people say that and then go ahead and do an introduction. So what I want to tell you is we know this guy. And if you don't, you will know him in a matter of seconds. Robert Otto is our leader of IACT IMDHA, and he has been evolving hypnosis for a long time and moving with the changes. So we'd really love to talk to Robert Otto tonight about changing hypnosis.
Hi, Robert.
Hi. I might thought you wanted to say something else, Michael. You leaned
Great
in.
introduction. Thank you, Karen.
But over to Robert.
Thank you.
It's good to have you with us, Robert. I just want to let the people know, because you and I talked a little bit about this. Our topic tonight basically has to do with how we learn and how we learn through time and stuff like that. And we're going to have quite a discussion about that a little later. But the particular reason I thought that you were the perfect person to kick this off is that, you've been around this business for as long as I have, and we've seen a lot of changes, So we have this wonderful opportunity with you to talk about anything from where we've been to look where we are now, and what's next. So first, just welcome to the show, and say hello to the folks.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad everyone's attending. I do want to give the dates, Michael, for Hypno Expo 2021. And cool. they are May 21 through May 23, 2021, Orlando, Florida.
Great.
Now you talk about where did we come from? Yeah. Michael, that's so funny. When I heard that you were going to ask those questions, I thought, well, the first conference I ever walked into was Walter Seacourt's Institute of Relaxology. And that was back in 1978. I walked into the conference and said, wow, this is what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. And it was, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I have to do. I just felt the calling for it. So when you mentioned that, I went through, I have a library probably with 800 or 1,000 books in there on hypnosis. And I went through and I pulled some of this stuff out. And you're probably going to laugh at it, Michael, but you've probably seen it. Self-Hypnosis by Melvin Powers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How about this one? Melvin Powers, Advanced Techniques of Hypnosis.
Oh, yes, I have that. But this is all Wilshire.
Hypnotic Signaling, Sosin.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Look at this. Gibson, Hypnotism.
Yeah.
This is where we're coming from. How to hypnotize yourself and others, Copeland. And see if you remember this one, Michael. This was one of the first courses I took before I could get into school. This was Potentials Unlimited.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Oh,
Barry
wow.
Konikoff?
Yes,
This is
yes.
1978, bud.
Yeah, Konikoff.
So,
Yeah. Barry Konikoff, right?
yeah, Barry Konikoff. Yeah. And you know, so that's where the roots started 40 years ago. And it's just amazing how things have evolved. I'm here with you 40 years now. We're in the business for 40 years, and I'm not sure if everyone's aware of it, but I didn't do a one-on-one practice, as you know. I did a one-on-one practice in January of 1980 for 1 month, and decided that I just felt it in my heart, you know, that I wanted to go and move on and do something bigger. And I put together a seminar practice, and I was talking to Walter Secord and some hypnotist from Delaware, and we're in an elevator with my mentor, Matthew Sportelli. We're going up in the elevator, and this one kid said to me, he said, "So what are you going to do in hypnosis? What are you going to specialize in?" I said, "Smoking," and I said, "Smoking and weight loss."
Are we done? Okay, I'll be right here. You tell me when you're ready. Okay, go ahead.
Can you hear me there, Michael?
Yeah, I got it.
I said, I'm going to specialize in smoking and weight loss, and I'm going to put a package together and go on the road. This was in 1980. He goes, that market's all dried up. I said, really, you know? So we started doing seminars, and the groups were small, 15, 20, 25, 30. And we did 29 states, and we did those 29 states for 28 years. And we went back every 2.5 to every 3 months, back to the same city, same hotels and everything. And it started out small, but you know, I think Mother Nature likes to test us in this business. They want to see what is our stickability. And you know, the more stickability you have, the more blessings come. And I thought, I'm not going to deviate from the plan. You know, there's an old saying, you have not because you ask not. And I thought, I'm just going to stick with this, and I'm just going to stay with the program. And it was funny because all the way up through 28 years later, we were doing groups in Vegas of 1,000, 1,200, 1,500 people a night, New York City. So it really did blossom. And you know, the one thing that comes to mind in the heart is that if you're going to be in it, be in it. You know what I'm saying? Give it 110% of everything that you have. I'm going to say our rewards in life can only ever match our service rendered. If we give the proper service, the proper rewards are there. So I'd like to ask a lot of people, you know, do you have the rewards in life that you feel that you're worthwhile of having? And if they say no, well, then that tells me that they're offering an improper service. If you're offering a proper service, then the proper rewards will always be there. And I do account it to stickability. So, and it's really evolved. I think the acceptability of hypnosis to the general public has expanded so much in the last 40 years because, you know, I grew a beard 40 years ago because I looked too young to hypnotize people. I was in a room one time and there was a couple old timers sitting in the front room. He goes, I'm smoking for 55 years. And he said, you the kid, you're going to get me to stop smoking after 55 years. And I go, well, I have to do something. I have to change the image. I have to look older. So I grew the beard back and I've had it on since 1980. But the acceptability, I think, to the general public has become widely acceptable compared to what it was 40 years ago. Right. But there's people like me and you and Karen and all of our members, and we're out there and we're working hard and we're getting the results that we need and what the people are expecting. And it's word of mouth, you know, it's word of mouth. So
well, and you know, Robert, it's got to be too that thanks to the internet, word of mouth is really an amazing thing. Because
that's true.
Because we certainly can get the message out there to more people that we wouldn't have access to before.
Well, you know, the organization educates its members. We educate the members. It's up to the members to go out and delegate what they've been educated on. I mean, you and I and a few of us can't do that, but when all of the members get together and they have that good quality background education, then they can go out and they can delegate that. And that's why we upped our hours years ago, because, you know, there's hypnotists that like to come into the business and they think, well, we can do this and we can do this fast and we can make money at it. But if they're not well educated, and if they're turning failures out of their office, this industry does not need that negativity.
Sure.
So up the hours, get quality people who really want to learn and make a profession out of this. When you have a higher quality certified hypnotherapist or hypnotist, they're going to give a better service. Then the reviews to the general public are better, and it changes the whole perception of what's going on versus a 20-hour certification course.
Yeah, yeah.
You know where I'm coming from on that, Michael?
Absolutely. Well, in fact,
Yeah.
you know, all those books you were holding up are evidence of this, that, you know, when you and I first started doing this, there weren't a lot of people teaching hypnosis certification.
There wasn't.
And there weren't organizations and there weren't associations, and
Right.
and so almost everybody was kind of operating on their own. And now we have this lovely community to be able to interact with and continue to grow.
The gentleman, my mentor, was Dr. Matthew Sportelli. And he had learned from Walter Secord and a bunch of other, Harry Aaron, and he had been to all of those guys. And he had a school and he had it closed down. And I wound up going to, he had a gentleman as another hypnotist in his office that was doing hypnosis. And I went to him and I had a session, and I called him like 2 days later and said, can I book another session? Because I knew nothing about hypnosis. So I was booking 3 and 4 sessions a week with this guy. So finally he said to me one day, he said, hey, listen, he said, I'm a guest speaker down the Walter Secord. He said, Michael, I'll never forget it. 40 years ago, he says, he said, my room's paid for because I'm a speaker. He said, why don't you come down with me and rub elbows with the big boys? He said, you might like what you see.
That's great.
But and it's been an amazing ride for 40 years. I mean, it's been my life dedication, you know, and I worked hard all the way through, and then was actually blessed with IAC and IMDHA. And we took those reins over, and that's got to be 14, 15 years ago now. And it continues to grow and to evolve. And I'm super impressed with people like Wes Rocky and Karen Hand and everybody that we have there that comes to the conference and presents. And we're blessed with all of the members who come, who want to continue to grow and learn and expand in the business. And again, you know, it comes back to stickability. I was taught years ago, Michael, you know, the stronger the want, the easier the how. So if you have that strong want, the how becomes easier, you know? Yeah.
And we are lucky to have you, Robert and Linda, because you guys are really dedicated to offering education to your members. And so when something happened this year and you had to get flexible, you and Linda and Michael put your heads together and said, how are we going to make this happen? We still have people that need this education that we promise.
Well, Karen,
you evolved into it.
Let me tell you what, Karen, you were a big hand in that too. I mean, don't give credit to Linda and Michael. I mean, you pulled your share too.
I held down a room. I got to do what I like to do. I got to waltz in and talk and host. And but all of y'all really did a stellar job. And I'm so proud I'll do anything because I'm so proud to be involved in this organization.
Well, and again, you know, it's probably because we're dedicated, and Michael as well, you know, because we're here for 40 years. And I think deep down inside, we really care where the industry is going and where the profession is going. And I almost have the feeling, and maybe Michael does too, that, geez, if I back out, what's going to happen? You know, so we got to sort of hang in there. And again, we were looking for membership years ago, Karen. You know, our membership, when we were blessed with IAC and IMDHA, it wasn't about the quantity of members, how many members can we get? You know, and I remember coming back to the office after we acquired those organizations, and I made a statement and I said, it's not about the quantity of members and low education. It's about the quality of members that we can have, because that's the only thing that's going to separate us from everything else in the world going on. Lower outer education. So we have to up the ante. We have to bring in more dedicated, more professional people who really care. And we don't need 20,000 members. I'm happy with 8 or 10,000, but of quality people. I would be happy with 3 or 4,000 people, but of quality. That's what we want. The numbers don't concern me. The quality is what concerns me. And that's where my heart lies. And you can probably see that in the classes we offer and what we offer at conference and everything that Michael's doing online. It's quality, not chasing quantity. Yeah.
That's great. So Robert, I just want to tell you that 40 years ago, I met at one conference.
You make me feel so old.
I met Timothy Leary. I met Larry Garrett.
Oh yeah.
And
great gentleman, Larry.
And I met Walter Secord.
Oh yeah, yep.
And by the way, this was the first hypnosis conference that I was at.
And what year was that?
A little wart on my knuckle.
Yeah.
And Walter took a hold of my hand and got me in his gaze and said something to me. And all I can tell you is, you can see my hand, not there. And I think that this is the first time that I ever saw any of the phenomena that I had been reading about actually happen. So,
Michael, what year was that?
That would have been, actually, it wasn't quite 40. That was 1981, I think, in Houston. 81,
oh, in Houston. Okay.
81 or 82.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. He was there doing his ultra depth thing, of course, and Irene Dickman was there, and all of those folks. So well, listen, Robert. It's lovely talking to you. We need to move on to Act 2 here in a second, but I'd love to just leave you with one more question, if you would, and that
Sure.
is, because we have had 40 years of experience, and you've seen these, and you know where we are now. If somebody came up to you today and said, Robert, I've just kind of found out about this hypnosis thing. I'm thinking about getting involved with it. What do you think? What would you say? What would you say to them? What kind of advice do you have for?
I say, here's Michael Watson's number. I would tell them, actually, I'll be honest with you real quick here. I would tell them that I think, I thought 40 years ago was a ground floor opportunity. And for me, it was. But the way that I see the industry growing, my advice to them would be, you don't necessarily have to come to IAC or IMDHA, but my advice to them would be, make sure you get a good quality education and continue with your CEUs and continue to grow. A friend of mine, 35 years ago, he went to General Motors Training School out in Detroit, Michigan. And when he came back, he told me when he walked in to do the General Motors Training School, he said there was a big sign above the door, and the sign said, when you're green, you grow, and when you're ripe, you're rotten. He said, so always be growing. And I've sort of stuck to that motto within the hypnosis profession as well. As long as we're continuing to expand and increase our knowledge and grow, let me tell you what, it's a ground floor opportunity, and there's, I'm going to say it, millions of dollars to be made in the industry. There is. But you have to get in there, and you have to dedicate yourself, and don't be sidetracked with another part-time or full-time job. If this is what you're going to do, man, do it 110%. The rewards in life can only ever match the service rendered, Michael? Yeah. And that's where I'm at, bud.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much.
Okay, Michael.
It's great.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Yeah.
Karen, thank you. It was an honor being here to everyone listening. Thank you so much.
You betcha.
Thank you.
Appreciate having you. Thanks.
All right.
Okay.
Well, Sharon, what do you?
Robert started talking about some of the books that he started out with and that really helped him along. And I haven't seen all of those. I've seen 1 or 2 of those. And, I've got some Yatko in my collection. And of course, Dave Ellman's Hypnotherapy in my collection and some of the old line books. But we evolve, we grow, and we continue to learn. So I learned from some classic old style elements, and I continue to learn with things like conversational regression by Jess Marion and the visual squash. Oh my, Jess Marion and Sean Carson. And deep trance identification and Sean Carson, Jess Marion, and John Oberdorf. The beat coaching system, Sean and Sarah Carson. I'm just saying, I have a whole library of this is where I did my upgraded learning, because I found these books and said, oh my gosh, yes, I practice, excuse me. Yes, I do this, but what else can I learn? What else can I pick up, and how can I take my talent forward? How can I learn more? And I think we're really honored tonight to have one of these tremendous authors on with us to talk about continued learning. Michael, did I steal her introduction from you?
Well, you haven't stolen it yet, but because I'm going to say her name in a second. And before I do want you to know, Karen, that 40 years from now, I'm willing to bet you that on some hypnosis broadcast, some old teacher is going to be holding up the books that they were looking at when they were first starting out. And one of them is also going to be Karen Hand's magic words and language patterns, I believe.
Yeah, well, I showed Jess's, so I might as well show mine too.
Yeah, so you might as well show yours too. So look, we're in the presence of brilliance, and what you said was really right for this, and Robert really also set it up for us. What we're interested in talking about tonight, and what I had asked Jess here to talk about as well, is how it is that we continue to learn. That I used to have the idea, and here you and I, Karen, and Robert and Jess, and a whole bunch of folks maybe on this call have a vested interest in training hypnotherapists and doing certification programs. But the thing that's really of interest to me today is once you've been certified, some people think that that's when you finally have learned it. I think that's when you finally have got permission to go ahead, and start learning from the experience you're having. And so that's what I really want to look forward to talking with Jess about, and why I called her. I know you're hearing us, Jess, and I'm gonna actually introduce you in a second. But this is also an Ericksonian principle, by the way. That is that we learn from our clients, that we respond to the things that are happening as they're happening. So I couldn't be happier than to have Jess here with us, who has spent the last 10 years of her professional life dedicated to the playful art of client change. She is a hypnosis trainer, HNLP and NLP trainer, a master coach, a hypnotist, and an author. She has written 10 books and is a pioneer in the field of deep trance identification. So Jess Marion, I hope that you're out there and can say hello to us.
Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me.
There we go.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the generous introduction, guys. I really do appreciate it. I'm touched. And I'm really excited to be on tonight. I was excited when Michael called me to ask me to be on, and then I was even more excited when I heard what the topic was going to be, because I feel like for most of my career as a trainer, I cannot count the number of times I tell our students to keep learning. Certification isn't the end. It's really just the start of a lifetime of learning. And I personally wouldn't be in this field if there wasn't more opportunity to learn. My background, I was a medical anthropologist by training. I worked in academia. My entire life before hypnosis was dedicated to this pursuit of wisdom. And I'm so happy that we are in a field where that type of mentality, that type of passion can be nurtured in all of us. And there's wonderful and unexpected ways as practitioners that we can learn, whether it's from our clients, from continuing to take courses, which I highly recommend. I still do it. Things like supervision. And also the things that we read and come across in the wider world outside of the realm of hypnosis. The more you can look at diverse fields and start making connections with what you're doing with clients, the more seamless and profound your change work becomes. But more importantly, at least for me, hypnosis and hypnotherapy and coaching for me is really a quest for truth. trying to understand what is this thing that we call life? What is its purpose? And the more we can learn and bring in outside influences and start making those connections, the more expansive our understanding becomes, more expansive, more holistic, both in the client, in the therapy room, as well as in our own lives and for our own well-being.
And isn't it fun to do applied learning? Because that's what we get to do. We get to learn something new, and then we get to apply it. We get to test it out. We get to try it. It's really cool. And I'm curious, Jess, about your past life, that medical academia past life. So present tense past life. What did you learn from that, all of that, and bring into this world with you?
One of the big things was I learned very early how to read scientific journals, how to understand things like experimental design and how data is parsed out. And why that's important is that the world of neuroscience is a very strong field, or a very strong kind of river that runs through a lot of the work I do with clients. So it's a useful skill to actually be able to look at the medical literature. So that's kind of like on one level. But really on a deeper level, the reason why I went into medical anthropology, by the way, was my work was focused on how I could work with communities facing outbreaks of infectious disease and communicate to those various cultures in a way that they culturally understand, so that we would have proper protocols for handling dead bodies and cleanliness. And, we could apply it to the mask situation in the US. So it's kind of interesting to see all that play out now, because that was very much the work that I was doing. And the reason why I was doing that was because I was really passionate about creating lasting change, doing something good in the world, leaving a legacy, or helping the world to be a better place after I leave it than it was before I got here. And I think, and I hope that for anybody who's working in the hypnotherapy world, that we all have this kind of altruistic endeavor of leaving it better than it was when we got here. So I carry that through, and that tends to be one of the things that really keeps me engaged with clients and this kind of bigger frame for what we're doing. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily something that I bring from that, but I think
I just got a little pause in your video. You still with us, Jess? Yeah.
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yeah. Okay, thanks. I was worried about that.
Yeah.
So we've got this frame about continuing education, about learning as we go as well, which is kind of the thing that I think is interesting. And it was weird because it occurred to me, Karen used the phrase earlier, applied learning. And I thought that's kind of neat. That is, you learn something and then you go out and you do it. But I also have an experience growing up on the lakes in northern Wisconsin and on water skis when sometimes you have to learn exactly while it's happening. You don't get to like apply it later that you're gonna smash into into a dock or something else, or you're going to learn how to maneuver, and you have to learn it right now. And I think that's the kind of thing that can be terrifying, right? But it's also the thing that can be so enlivening if what we do is have all of our receptors open, when we're with a client, and go, what that communication that I just heard, what does it teach me? What does it show me? Where does it lead me? And how am I going to interact with this client, as opposed to, gosh, what was this thing that they taught us in my hypnosis class about how to do with a person that has this problem?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm fascinated and really wanted to kind of hear your talk on that, about how it is that we learn from our clients as we're in progress, and what that means to you.
And that's actually my preferred way of learning. So the distinction that you're making, these are the two ways that we all learn. We learn deductively, like where you learn something and you go and you try it out and you grow from it. Or you learn in the moment, that's more inductive. The best way to learn inductively is to be in trance, by the way. That is the ultimate in inductive learning processes. And the way that we do it as hypnotists is, the quote that actually comes to mind as you were talking about it, Michael, comes from Steve Jobs. when he was giving one of his famous speeches at, I can't remember what school's graduation it was, but he said, you know, you can only ever connect the dots looking back. So if we're in a session and we're in our head, if we're up here thinking, like having words and stuff, and even like looking back to what happened a few seconds prior with the client, we take ourselves out of now. And that means that we're not completely receptive to what's happening. So the best thing to do is to keep yourself as a practitioner in now.
Yeah.
To keep yourself grounded in the present moment with your client, because all change happens now. It can't happen in the past. It can't happen in the future. And when you stay grounded in now, and you have that, and you're in relationship, you're in that hypnotic rapport with your client, then you're going to start picking up more from them. And you're also going to be really comfortable with experimenting. So you might have a feeling, and you might, you know, something might come out of your mouth you weren't expecting, or you might, you know, try something new that you hadn't planned. And that's how, like, the best techniques are created, by the way.
Yeah.
And the way you learn from it is after the session, you look back and you kind of do the conscious mind evaluation, but you have to be in the session in the more inductive state, in that more creative state.
Yeah.
A sense of curiosity is a really, really good forerunner for that type of hypnotist trance.
And
for myself,
just because I keep seeing Dr. Wes's face here out of the corner of my eye, who's you know, our friend with regard to particularly likes to talk about improvisation and improv. I think that's the kind of working with clients that we're talking about here as well.
Yep. It's the yes and. It's completely improvisational theater.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's fun that way. In fact, kind of a teaser, but I've been tossing around the idea of writing another installment of the DTI book with new patterns. And the patterns that will come from it are things that just accidentally happened in a session. And when I wrote down the session notes, it's like, oh, that's interesting. Then you can take the more deductive approach like Karen's talking about, and then try it with somebody else, and do you get a similar result? So there's deductive learning, and then there's experimentation for the deductive side, and it's improvisation, absolutely.
And that's
I didn't hear you say it is regurgitation. In other words, what we do is not, well, here's the steps that I have to do 1, 2, 3, 4, and do those regardless. I mean, yeah, it can be done that way, and that can work too. But typically it's, okay, here's a concept, and how are we going to take this concept and mesh it with a different concept for this particular client? Mm-hmm. Because as you said, if we're in our head about what is step 1, 2, and am I on step 3 or step 4, we're not with our client.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we teach, especially like at the foundational level, like in an NLP practitioner course, we're going to teach the standard patterns. We're going to teach a swish and a visual squash and like the stuff we've written books about. But ultimately, those patterns, the purpose of any hypnotic pattern, whether it's from NLP or if it's, you know, an element approach or an Ericksonian approach or anything else, the purpose of any pattern is to facilitate a relationship. It is not the pattern that gets the change, it's the relationship. So if you get lost in the steps of a pattern, then you miss out on the relationship. You miss out on the magic, if you will. Mm-hmm. So patterns are useful because they facilitate a relationship. And when it comes to the actual piece of change work, for ourselves, I would encourage everyone to think about these standard patterns that might be your go-tos or the patterns you've learned in your various trainings, and really become curious about what are the underlying principles. Because once you understand the underlying principles, then you have a lot more freedom to experiment and be more in that inductive state. So if we take, for example, the visual squash, well, the underlying principle is the person is caught in an either or bind. That's the problem. The problem is not part of me thinks this and part of me thinks that. It's not the parts that's the problem. It's the bind that the client puts themselves in. So if we understand that, then we can do a standard visual squash, which there are times where that's completely appropriate and the best option, but we don't have to, because there's going to be times where that's not appropriate. So we want to take this bigger frame of what's going on, where for the NLPers, something like a map across, which when I first learned it, hated it. It's a very clunky technique for those who aren't familiar with it. But the principle that it teaches is this idea that you can take something from one aspect of your client's life and slide it into the problem context, and it changes the problem. So if we have this holistic view of, okay, what are these underlying principles, then we can get really playful.
Yeah.
And we don't have to think about steps.
Nice. Nice.
Do you have a specific thing that you can think of that you learned from a client? You did the work, you did everything along the way, and light bulb went off. I learned something in this session. I learned something here.
Almost every session, honestly. Sometimes it's these big picture things, or like these changes in my own beliefs around change work. And other times it's more, for lack of a better word, practical, in that new patterns come out. The entirety of our quit book, the patterns that I had developed in those, and kind of the phase or the process of the protocol, I didn't plan that. That came out of a lot of trial and error with clients. The same with DTI came from experimentation. I actually just wrapped up a DTI program with a client last week, and I thought, okay, we're going to do something new. I didn't know what it was going to be, but it was in the moment, and I ended up with a new pattern that I can now play with and experiment to see if it generates the same result with other clients. So I always learn something from a session. It could be something as awesome and big as a new pattern or a new protocol, or it can be in terms of learning about kind of my own inner landscape, in terms of maybe, if I have a session where I kind of feel like something a little bit cringy was touched, then I can be curious, okay, what is it about what the client is saying that has changed my state? So I learn more about myself, and gives an opportunity for growing, for personal development and that sort of thing. And, I also learn a lot about just people in general, how we are as social creatures, things that in my life as an academic, the books don't convey. So, if you set your intention to learn this stuff, it's really hard, but if you're just open to it, then you'll find that there's a lot of things that your clients will teach you. On the more deductive side, the applied learning side, especially when I do things like teach kind of complex stuff like nonlinear language, the best way to learn, if you have a technique or skill you want to develop, is to take one small, tiny piece of it. Like, for example, one language pattern, or the use of negation. And you just set the intention, and like say, hey, unconscious processing. Today in my sessions, I want to practice this skill, and then let it go. And you'll find that on reviewing your sessions, you will have practiced, but it's inductive. There's no forcing, and there's no trying to get clients to fit into patterns or that type of thing.
Yeah, yeah. I think sometimes we think of learning as the process by which we come to the generalizations that we hold later on. And one of the things that I'm learning, which is kind of paradoxical, is how important it can be to avoid coming to generalizations at all, or when it comes to working with clients.
Yeah, generalizations are useful until they're not to be vague about it. Sometimes they're good. Smokers, it's kind of easy to generalize, but only generalize to the extent that you're open to that generalization being proven wrong, because it will be.
Well, yeah.
By the way,
generalize about people like that.
Showed a bunch of your books, by the way. I didn't mean to diss this one, your quit book. I've got that one too, or the quit that goes along with it, or your swish. I'm just saying, I didn't bring the entire volume of everything you've got that I have in my library over here, but I can pull it. If you call out another book, I'll pull it and I'll show it.
I think we ran through most of them.
I was going to say, you'll have to get a bigger office if Jess keeps writing.
I hope she does keep writing. What prompted you to write? I mean, you guys are copious writers. And what has driven you to put all of this on paper? Is it because you didn't find the material that you were looking for and thought it had to be out there? What was it that drove you?
Well, I think at first the three of us, for those of you who don't know me, Sean and Sarah Carson are my business partners. What originally motivated us was, hey, it would be good to have a book. And we had the smoking protocol, and we knew it worked, and we wanted to share it. We thought it was important to get that out there. And this was back in 2012, 2011, we started writing that book, somewhere in there. And like the world of digital marketing was really, it was a very different animal than what it is today. And we weren't quite at the level of doing digital products, but you know, we're all highly educated academics. So we're like, okay, well, let's write. And you know, the talk about a learning experience, the first book we did is a transcript from a course, and we thought that would be easier than writing a book from scratch. No, I learned that that's way harder. I'm not ever doing that again. But after we did that, you know, at least for myself, it was kind of pulling back again from my academic background, because I had to write copious amounts back then. But for me, it gives me an opportunity to really reflect on and explore ideas in a way that I can't do even when doing videos or doing classes, because even something like this, and I love connecting this way, this is one of my preferred ways, this is externally focused. So, you know, I have to track the conversation. On one level of me is tracking what I'm saying. Another level is kind of tracking what other people's responses are. It's a performance in some ways, where writing is a very internal experience. It's a very kind of focused, very specific type of trance that for me allows me to be creative in a way that other mediums don't allow for. Sometimes I get really, really, okay, so some people might call it obsessed. I'll just say dedicated. And I'll, like the conversational regression book, I turned out fairly quickly because I was on fire with it, wanted to get it done, wanted it to get out. And it was like a compulsion, like it had to be out there. I'm working on a book on hypnotic coaching right now. I've been working on it for almost 3 years now. And it's a labor of love, but I don't feel the need to have to finish it in any time frame, because it's letting me explore and grow in ways that I wasn't expecting. So we put the books out there and we hope that people enjoy the ride. I know like that medium is not for everybody, I get it, especially some of our books like DTI tend to be a bit lengthy. However, for us, it's a labor of love, it's a passion, it's interesting, and if it means that, you know, somebody can pick it up and maybe think about things slightly differently for a time, awesome.
Yeah. Now, I was hoping to ask you what you learn from writing a book, but you are addressing it. You are learning as you are writing the one that you are writing now. As yes. The process of writing is a learning experience.
Yes, it's forcing me to really refine how I teach certain things. So the section I'm working on right now, which is a large part of the book actually, is about the different ways of working with parts and introjects. And it has really sharpened how I teach that, like in a live class or online. It's refined how I think about it and how I present the information. And it also, writing, I can, personally, I can be a little bit science heavy, and that's good, but that's not always great in a training environment because it can be overwhelming. And when it's in a book, it's even more obvious. So writing a book is like holding, so it makes me a better trainer. Nice. So the book writing is completely selfish.
Cool. Well, and you know, so we started out the conversation even before we started talking with you, Jess, when we had Robert on the line. You know, Robert started out by holding up about 7 books or so and saying, you know, here's where I learned from this, and I learned from this, and I learned from this, and then we're about to introduce you, and then Karen reaches into her library and says, and I learned from this, and I learned from this. This is the message that I really am hoping to get across here, is that there are hypnosis classes, and God bless us who teach them, and God bless those of you who take them. And, and then there is, what are you going to do for the rest of your life if you are in fact dedicated to continuing to grow and to learn in this field? So here are all these great books for us to read. There's one way. And another way, of course, it seems like from what I'm hearing you say, Jess, another way to learn a great deal is from writing a book.
Mhm.
I'm sure that will do it. And of course, also just from all of the things that happen in the world. So I want to expand this out just a little bit with regard to the practice of hypnosis. I'm curious to ask you, and I've got several different sources like this that I'd like to consider. We've just been engaged in this amazing situation that we're all, locked in or locked down, or businesses open or not open, and masks and no masks, and et cetera, et cetera. The experience of COVID and the practice of hypnosis has also has to have had, if we're really paying attention, has to have taught us all a great deal. So I'm kind of curious about, what have you learned from COVID that's relevant to the way that you work or practice hypnosis?
Well, that's a big question.
Yeah, cool.
Living here in New York City, especially March really through the end of May, it was a very, very different experience from people in lots of other places in the US. Words cannot, for me, adequately describe the horror of what happened here. Yeah. And I think one of the big takeaways from that is, for hypnotists, myself included, being comfortable with not trying to reframe it, not trying to change a negative right to a positive. Sometimes shit happens and you just gotta, and the way to deal with it is not to run away and not to try and put this superficial, like, smiley face, happy state on top. That doesn't work. And that's also not ecological. And unfortunately, I have come across in many of the self-help personal development fields, hypnosis being one of them, NLP being another, essential oils being a third, where there is this tendency to pull away from anything negative. There is a need to force a positive view on a client, when that's not always appropriate. Sometimes you really have to pace for a long time before you can lead. So I think it's, really about being okay with, being okay with the shadow, like the fact that, at least here, we were in the darkness for a long time, and just being okay with managing that and surviving through that, and knowing that eventually that comes to an end. Yeah. And something better is ahead. So I think really patience would be the key thing, and really pacing a session in a way that is balanced, in that we don't want the client to kind of spin in a negative state the entire session. That's not useful. Otherwise, why are they even paying us? They could just call their friend and, have a tear session there. But
group.
Yeah. So you have to balance that, but sometimes, just taking the next smallest step. So not expecting to completely change someone's life in one session, but just helping them to make a slight change, and understand the principle of recursion, which means that when you make one small change in the system is going to change. And as that system changes, it will reinforce the initial change. So it's like a momentum game, being comfortable with that. So for me, that's a big takeaway. And, on a personal level, I got to say, this is an experience I will never forget. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably more things to garner from that. But I think we don't have the luxury of time yet to do that.
There's one thing that I think, and I'm sure it's got to have changed for you. It's certainly changed for me. We are spending a whole lot of time now, because of COVID, online, connecting in different ways, than we have before. And I think the business of the hypnotic relationship, as you point out so well, as being, I think, really the primary issue in change, we end up having to find new ways to relate to our clients, new ways to interact with them in a time like this. And that's certainly got to be changing the way that we work.
Yeah, I think so. You know, there is a difference between an in-person session and a Zoom session, without a doubt. And it's the only way I can describe the difference is it's an energetic thing. It's really difficult for me to quantify that. I know it, you know, I know it as a coach and as a therapist. I know it as someone who has been a client in the past. There is a greater level of dissociation that happens digitally. You want like a prime example of that? Look at how people behave on Facebook. The dissociation is huge. So as practitioners, we have to be aware of that. But that also means that we can do things to bridge that gap and to really connect. And one of the big ways of doing it for me is exquisite calibration skills. So really tracking the client's unconscious cues, really being aware of what the unconscious is saying before the conscious mind. And as you start to acknowledge that, even through, I mean, we do that in live sessions anyway, but it becomes even more important digitally, because that's going to be kind of one of the big forerunners of a powerful hypnotic relationship.
Yeah. And by the way, Zoom has Zoom been added to the dictionary yet?
Say it again.
Has Zoom been added to the dictionary yet?
Well, it's already been added to the lexicon, so it won't be long.
Yeah.
It's just so amazing. I mean, I'm hearing on TV all, you know, on the regular television, on the newscast, the newscast. We have interesting media here. On the newscast, I heard them saying something about the the convention is streaming, and there's going to be and Joe Biden had a Zoom meeting with Kamala, et cetera, et cetera. It has become a word that is so present in our vocabulary, and I think that before March, half of the people in the country didn't even know what Zoom was.
Right.
Always true. And I got to hand it to you guys. You guys were like the forerunners of this, because you guys were already holding Zoom trainings. I mean, well before me. I just did the sales page for the first course that we're selling that is completely on Zoom. So you guys were ahead of the curve quite a few years ago now, with both this and also running the trainings and the joint classes you've done together. So my hat's off to you.
Yeah, cool.
Michael is the evolutionary hypnotist. I mean, that's all him. We've got to move forward. We've got to take it to the next level.
We gotta. And speaking to the next level, then you started to say something a little while ago, Jess. I heard you indicate this. We have all these different places to learn from, right? And another one, and I have no idea how you're going to answer this. This is a wild card, but what have we learned from social media that makes a difference in terms of how we practice hypnosis?
We've really learned the principle of just how powerful dissociation is. I always have like a mixed relationship with social media, in that on one hand, actually I'm going to need like 3 hands to do this. It's like not even a visual squash anymore. On one hand, it's great to like stay in contact with our friends and have like this fun banter. On another hand, it's really important for business. On the third hand, there's a lot of really awful things that happen on social media, and because of social media, it's very concerning, especially with the youth. But I think as well for adults, there's a lot of bullying and that type of thing. And the takeaway is that I take from that, because it's a mechanism of dissociation that allows people to behave like that, because they're not going to behave like that if they're face to face with the person, is to kind of flip that and go, wow, just think, if somebody on social media completely dissociates from the people they're communicating with, that's kind of a cool skill to have if somebody is having some sort of conflict with people in their lives, that they can dissociate from the negative emotions. That's a really powerful thing. So for me, I think kind of taking the skills that people use to engage in social media, whether positive, negative, or neutral, there are things to learn there in terms of our client work. On the positive side, the ability to connect. We see a video from our friends, or a pleasant post, and it elicits an emotional response. Well, that's the energy that drives change. Emotion creates change, not words, not thoughts. It's the state in the body. So we can really see that in social media that, even with just some words on a page, we have the power to be a source of positive change for people. And I think that's a really special thing.
But you can only on social media have a certain number of emotions. Remember, you can have the thumbs up, the smiley face, you can have anger, you can have sadness, but that's it.
No, you just click on the little emoji button. There's like 100 in there.
Well, that's true. It's even that, even they learned from that and evolved that and grew that.
Yeah.
And they added a new one right in the middle of lockdown, didn't they? The smiley
hug
face with a heart or something that seems to have been added. Yeah.
I mean, if we want to just take like basic principles, memes are anchors. You want like a really great example of anchors, look at any meme out there. If it makes you laugh, that's because that picture has been anchored in to a whole bunch of associations. So even on the
and then there's some that don't make me laugh.
Yeah.
And that's been anchored in as well.
Yeah, different state.
That's right. But there again, this is something we can learn from something else. And you can learn anchoring from this, or here's an example of it in real life as we're teaching this to other people. Those are great examples of how to teach what this means. Here's an example of what it is. Jess, what have you learned from things that you didn't think you would like? In other words, if you've gone to, I'm sure that you've gone to conferences where you think, yeah, I don't really agree with that philosophy, or I don't really do that kind of thing, but I'm going to go see this just to see what's out there. What have you learned from things that you actually didn't know that you would like, or know that you would agree with, or learn something from?
It's kind of a mix. In some cases, I was really pleasantly surprised. So I tend not to go in, like at a conference, for example, I tend not to go into any of the talks I go to with any kind of preconceived notion unless I've trained with the person before. So for example, I first met Michael at IACT. I did not know this guy. And I went to a 40-minute talk from him, loved it, and signed up for a course. On the flip side, I went to see a talk from someone who is a lovely person, who I won't mention their name, and they were a very good presenter. But as far as I was concerned, their content it wasn't for me. It was just a very different approach, a very different modality. So I had to be artful and not just go, oh, this is terrible, because it just wasn't for me. So the big learning there was, okay, how can I graciously have a different opinion and also graciously kind of step out of a situation before I kind of gave off the unconscious cues of not being happy. So a bit more kind of emotional flexibility, I'd say, would be a big thing. In terms of like techniques and stuff, I don't know, honestly, at this point. I've done more trainings than I can honestly track.
I do find nuances that I pick up from various places. Oh, that's a turn of phrase that is very, and that may be the only thing in an hour that I get out of it, but I love to take something and say, oh, I haven't heard that before. I haven't experienced that before. That's another way of looking at something.
Yeah, I'm currently doing an online course that I am deeply disappointed with. However, aside from kind of being an entertaining course, so I'm sticking with it. On the positive side, I'm currently teaching a hypnotic coaching course online that was supposed to be in person, but we had to move it online. And because of me taking this other course, I kind of saw all the things that went wrong. And I mean this very seriously, because there were things outside, this was not about the trainer. This was just kind of the technical things you have to overcome in facilitating a live course that hadn't even occurred to me doing it in the digital medium. So then I think, okay, well, these were the things that I didn't like about this. What can I do to help students not have a similar experience? How can I better leverage the technology? So for me, that is a huge positive learning moment. So that's probably the most recent one.
So what we can say about that is, what have you learned from the worst training you've ever taken? Or, right, because we do learn. And I'm not saying that this is the worst training, but we do learn. We learn what not to do. We learn what we would do different. We learn what doesn't work. We learn from all sorts of things that we do. If we go in with a learning frame, what can I learn from this?
Yeah, and that's exactly it. You have to be open. So even if, even if things go off the rails, which sometimes they do, there's still something positive that you can take out of it. And I think that a very important learning for all of us is that if we get into a training environment that doesn't work for us, that doesn't mean the training environment is inherently bad. It could be, there's some like wild examples, but for the most part, they're not. For the most part, trainers are not bad. They're not bad people. They're there to be supportive and to share their knowledge. So the best thing we can do in those situations is to be reflective and go, okay, well, what am I learning about my own boundaries here? What are the things that to me are non-negotiable, and how is this challenging that? And still, okay, what can I take from this that's going to be useful? So it's all about attitude. And then on the flip side, I think there's a lot to be said about being highly selective eventually about who you train with. If you attend enough trainings, you'll get a sense of like who your tribe is, what your lineage is. And, it's okay to really kind of stick with that if you continue to learn new things. The moment you stop learning new things, whether it's intellectual new things or it's emotional growth for you or professional growth, the minute that stops, you have to go elsewhere. Otherwise, you're going to stagnate, and stagnation causes death in the metaphoric sense.
Yeah, I know this one of the stories that I tell a lot, and I'm not going to tell the story so much. It's just the punchline is I keep saying that mastery is the skillful avoidance of conclusions.
Yes.
Just exactly, so that the door is still open. I find it interesting to notice sometimes when this I think is kind of relatively new with me. I've got to admit, I think maybe I'm getting older and perhaps even a little bit wiser. Is that if there is somebody that is teaching something that I've got a strong reaction against, that there's a part of me that says, oh, this is something I certainly don't want to be involved with, certainly not anything that I agree with. I think it's become really useful for me to take a minute and to find out if I'm feeling threatened by somebody's teaching, mm-hmm. then there's a great deal for me to learn about what's behind that. It will either strengthen me in something else that I already believe, or it will invite me to, just for a moment, what if I'd be willing to open up the door and consider that this other position may actually have some validity?
Yeah. That's exactly it. And, I think both are wonderful opportunities for learning. The training that I referenced, what I really took from it was I have some boundaries, some ethical boundaries that I will not cross, and I will not encourage or facilitate the crossing of those boundaries. And I think that's a really useful thing, to have a direct experience of being up against the wall and either going, okay, is this wall important and useful, or is there flexibility there? And either answer is going to be good.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes I think it's important for us too to find out what does some of the things that we get very concerned about in hypnosis that we are committed to, like orthodox beliefs, can be ridiculously insignificant, and yet it divides us up as a community. I think, Jess, you were a little bit involved online in this conversation, and I had asked about the critical faculty.
Yeah.
So here's this phrase, of course, and we know that there are people that call it the critical faculty, and there are people that call it the critical factor. And I gotta confess, and I might use a bad word here, I don't really give a shit. Which,
thank you.
In any practical sense, the problem is if it stops us from being able to communicate with each other. You go, oh, I'm not even going to listen to what that person says because they've used this word in the wrong way. Obviously, they don't know anything, and we divide ourselves as a community often into these kind of camps over something that makes not any difference whatsoever in terms of how we work with our clients. And by the way, I see Jim has put his hand up. I was just going to suggest
I think he's actually applauding you.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks.
I was applauding because I really, and actually I was also kind of hoping to raise my hand. You know, we're talking about, I keep hearing this discussion hit on frames and how we can either be in an emotional reaction or in a factual frame. And you know, getting to that perception is takes a little bit of work to cross the line of subjectivity into what is actually factual. But if we could just use our thesaurus in our head to come up with a difference between a critical factor, a critical factory, or a fact, whatever the hell you want to call it, whatever language you want to call it in, I have an inner assessor who is trying to decide X or whatever that may be. Yeah, I'm all for you know, creating less division by adding the flexibility of using what we already know factually, which is that a thesaurus is a real thing, and we've all got one in our head. And rather than being led around by our attention, we can start letting our intention lead the way. There you go. Clap my hand.
Now, would that be your subconscious mind or your unconscious mind?
Definitely. Absolutely.
I'm not getting into this one.
Yeah.
Jess, Darlene, I'm sorry to move on, but Darlene has a question for Jess that before we get too far away from that, what did you learn from that training that you're not taking into your training? Can you share some of those tips with us so that we won't make those mistakes?
Could you ask that a different way? I don't think I followed.
Okay, so Darlene says, Jess, what did you learn that would be okay to share so that we don't repeat the same online mistakes?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
You worded it far better than I did, so I'm glad.
So I had this like mind-bending moment with you, Karen. That's a great introduction. Yeah, so the big takeaways, if you're doing like a Zoom training, aware of group dynamic and group process, should be anyway. But in Zoom, because there is this level of dissociation, there's a lot more opportunity for people to opt out, which in some cases is fine. But if you want to do exercises and people keep opting out, you might end up with like just one person and you, which is putting a lot on the trainer. So having a level of commitment from participants is important. That's step one. Step two, the training that I alluded to had this rule that you had to have on Zoom, you had to have your camera turned on.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, because I am visually impaired, so I feel like if I do that, everybody else has an unfair advantage over me when I'm a student in the training. But also B, it's very invasive. Because it's Zoom, you know, people are in their homes, you might have life going on, you know, maybe you want to sit and eat a snack and not be on camera while you're eating. So having some flexibility and saying like, look, if you want to turn your camera off for certain points, that's fine. I tell the attendees on my training, when we're going through content, if you want your camera off, great. I just ask for the benefit of other people when we do the breakout rooms to turn your camera on if it's, you know, available and working. The next thing is to really, especially at the beginning, create experiences for the group to bond. Because there is that dissociation, the group won't bond as quickly or as naturally. And the reason why we need the group to bond is A, we want them to be on our side as trainers. But B, if we're doing anything like a hypnosis training or an NLP training, part of it is like the information, the facts, you know, critical, subconscious, unconscious faculty. But some of it, a much bigger part of it, at least from kind of the lineage I come from, is about personal transformation. So we create personally transformative experiences, but we wrap it in the idea of skills acquisition. And it's very hard for somebody to have moments of transformation if they don't trust the person that they're working with remotely, because they don't know each other. They can't like go have a drink in the bar after class. They don't share a flight somewhere together, and they're not roommates in a hotel, or they don't hang out by the pool. They're all separated and they don't know each other. It's really tough. And this, I actually gave the trainer of this course some pretty tough feedback on this one. And I said to them, look, you know, I'm pretty adept at trance, whether facilitating it or going into trance. And I was thrown into a situation where I was expected to express a level of vulnerability inappropriate to share with a stranger. So I had that feeling as the client, as the student, So in the training, you really want to create moments of group bonding. You can do it through icebreakers if you have a small group. I'd say a group under 10. Once you get above 10, it's too much. You can do a single icebreaker together, and there's lots of, you can do it through games, or I do it through discussion questions to get feedback back and forth. With bigger groups, you can do icebreakers in breakout rooms. You can assign people to different teams, and they can stay with those teams for the duration of the class or for certain points in the class. So the big takeaway is really to consider how can you create an environment online where people are comfortable going into trance with someone who they have potentially never met in real life, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And also where they're comfortable kind of exploring their inner landscape with this person in a meaningful way. And I can't say that I necessarily have it foolproof yet. I'll get some feedback after this course, I'm sure. But at least it's in my mind, and it's when it comes to planning each segment of the course, it's okay, how do I overcome the fact that we're separated by distance, but this is a course that meets twice a week, and we have a big chunk off of time for hypnothoughts. So when we meet again, I have to think about how I can help the group rebond, reform again. So that would be the big takeaway is really, really carefully consider group dynamics and managing that.
And Maria asked if you could give an actual example of a bonding experience that you can create online.
Sure. So, well, the first one I did, so the course I'm teaching is hypnotic coaching. So there were some very basic principles that we needed to go over that are, I say basic in that they're foundational for hypnotic coaching, that they will have been familiar with through hypnosis training, but we take a different spin. So for example, how I talk about conscious versus unconscious, it's not the same as how most hypnosis trainings talk about it. So you have to say, okay, well, how do you describe the conscious versus the unconscious to your clients? Get people to start volunteering things in. Okay, for you, how do you define trance? Is it a state? Is it compliance? Is it a social dynamic or something else? So then you start getting the back and forth. You get sharing between you and each of the people. So that's one way. At the beginning, you can do kind of a round robin, hey, who are you? What do you do? That's kind of a basic thing. Or if you want to be more trancey, create some sort of hypnotic experience for the group. So if a group goes into trance together, even if it's on screen, but they're seeing each other, that's already going to create a moment of bonding. Then send them off after you've done the induction and they're still in a nice state. Have them do a milling exercise. So answer a couple of questions and introduce themselves to each other. And you can do that by managing breakout rooms. So almost like chat roulette type thing. Those are kind of the introductory things. In terms of how to manage it after a big gap of time, I'll let you know in a couple weeks. I haven't thought it through yet.
All right, we'll be looking forward to that.
Well, and we've learned some stuff, and I might just add that into this conversation. I think one of the things that y'all will remember at the beginning of our program tonight, Karen, she got to do it tonight, but we seem to have the monthly finger wag about the appropriate use of the chat room in Zoom meetings and classes and all of that stuff. That can be a real issue when you're working with a class. And she didn't say it tonight, but I just want to get it on the record because we're talking about this right now. She has said it this way before. If you are writing, if people in the class are writing all over the chat room, if you got a big group and they're writing all over the chat room while somebody is trying to present something on the main screen, it's literally the equivalent of, if you can imagine being in the front of a training room and having somebody standing next to you with their own independent whiteboard, writing notes and their opinions about what you're saying and what they think of whether you even know what you're talking about, et cetera, while you're doing your presentation.
Nice.
And what a nasty experience that can be for a presenter, particularly if it's not going well. So I've seen that happen before in ways that I think are debilitating, but it also really distracts the class from the speaker because it's right there next to them and there's words flying up on the screen. So something that you need to take into account. And yet the other side of that is, and we've been doing it so far, we really don't want to stifle all the other people that are in the group and stop them from being able to talk. So here we are now at about 8 minutes or something like that till the end of our time. And I think we need to let everybody know, if you've got some questions for Jess, now would be the time to go ahead. You can put your hand up if you want. You can write it in the chat room, or you can actually open your microphone and say, "Hey, I've got a question."
So before we get really quick, Michael, I can troubleshoot this one for you.
All right.
So something else that I learned from the training that is not going the way I'd like it, is that you can, there are programs, there's chat programs out there. Telegraph is the one that we're using, where you can, it's free, you can set up groups and just tell everybody that they can chat in that. So it's a separate app. So that it keeps them out of the Zoom chat room, and they can have their own thing. So that's one way to sidestep the issue.
But it does take them away from the class.
It's adult learning, though.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I know, and I expect them to be adult about it.
Good luck.
That's great. So, anybody got anything for Jess? Go ahead and shout.
I do.
Go ahead. Hi.
Hi. Hey, Jess, you said that you were thinking about doing a new book on DTI because you've had some interesting case studies. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so, well, I actually have two books that are kind of percolating in my head. The first is going to be a collection of new patterns that we've developed. So it comes from like a number of different clients. And I haven't sat and gone through my case notes yet. The client who I just finished a DTI experiment with last week, we changed how we do the integration. Like in the initial book, we talk about making sure you do a visual squash and some belief change to resolve conflicts around meta programs as well as values. Instead of doing that, I used the tree of life, which we talk about in the book as well, as the primary path for the integration, which was very interesting. I've done some stuff with reverse DTIs, where I've had clients who were reverse DTIing into their model, and as their model associating into their counter model. But outside of that, like, it's very late right now, so that is probably the best answer. The second book, I'm actually about to start a project with someone who I facilitated a few DTIs with, who had really awesome results. And he's going to let me film everything, and we're going to do a complete 10-session program for music ability, for piano playing particularly. So that is I'm likely going to take the transcript of that and use that as a book. I know I said transcripts are bare, but it might be interesting for people to see how to structure the complete 10-session protocol. Those are the ones that are circulating. We'll see what happens.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Wes looks like he has a question.
Yes, Jess, my God, this was so beautiful. I have tons of things, but the most important is that issue of dissociation when we work online. And I have plenty of experience with that, because now I took already like 40 different classes on improv all over the world from different cultures. So, and improv, as you indicated, is the same as hypnotherapy, because eventually it's about facilitates relationship,
Yes.
which then leads to healing transformation when needed, right? So this is what improv, what hypnotherapy is about. And the way in improv we are dealing how to assure safety, because we go very deep.
Yeah.
And the way we do that, besides the typical improv rules, yes, and that you accept everything as a gift, and you add on top of the gift your gifts, and you do this with attention to partner and making sure that you are aware of circumstances. And then we bring issue of differentiation between the actor and character. Then character is the safe surrogate which we can present for healing. In character, we put all our wounds, or our things, because it is not us, it is character. And then we can safely manipulate the character and take the lessons of transformation back to the actor. But it is like, you know, it's like going to the Vegas. Whatever is in Vegas, stay in Vegas. So we do this to the character.
Yes.
So improv is yes and, but there is, you know, as every theatrical form is based on conflict. Because if there is no conflict, there is no transformation.
Sure.
There's no show.
So there is this risk of taking risk of being antagonistic for the good purpose.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do this through character, then everyone is very safe and very open, and it goes like this.
Absolutely. And what it does in the therapy session as well is it allows the client to step out of the negative state. And that's the only way that they can change it. They have to be at least neutral. So they have to be outside of it. So if I do a re-imprinting, it's exactly that. They have a character. They have an interject or a younger self that can be the carrier, the surrogate for all of that stuff. But they don't have to be a part of it. So I really love that metaphor, that way of describing it. That's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
And what's so beautiful is when we all come together and share wisdom, because we can learn from each other as we continue to learn, which is what we were talking about tonight, is how you continue to learn, keep the learning going.
Yes, indeed. And speaking of keeping the learning going, we have just run out to the end of our time for this evening, I'm afraid. But we will be here again next month, second Tuesday of the month, just like always. We're getting our program together, so we can't announce it just yet, but you will hear about that soon. Look tomorrow for the posted replay in the forum on what is this outfit? I'm I act and I am DHA. It's like what's the name of this group? and anyway, we'll hope that you'll look for it. It will be out there for you by about noon. This has been lovely. Have you had a good time, Karen?
I've had a great time. I want to make sure that we let Jess say how we can get in touch with her with questions or comments. How can we get in touch with you, or for trainings?
Great. Well, first, let me say thank you so much, guys. This was a lot of fun and really great to kind of throw around ideas, and a lovely way to spend Tuesday. And thank you to everybody who attended and for the questions and comments. Wes, it was lovely to see you. It's been a long time. So thank you, everybody, for hanging in there. If you're interested in trainings, you can visit us. Actually, just email me at theintelligenthypnotist@gmail.com. We do have an NLP, HNLP practitioner course coming up. If you're interested in that, go to theintelligenthypnotist.com/NLP 2020. If you're interested in supervision or sessions or questions, you can reach out to me on Facebook. You can DM me there, or again, email me at theintelligenthypnotist@gmail.com. It's really the best way. And friend me on Facebook. I'm sure you'll find me if we're not already friends.
All right. So it's been lovely. And you know what we always do, Jess, you will remember this. You've been here before. We're going to open up the microphones in just a minute so that everybody can wish you well and send you their love. And then we will be off until next month, everybody. So I am opening up these microphones. Yes, I am opening up these microphones now. And I guess y'all have to actually do it yourself. A new change.
Oh, you muted all of us. You wiped us all out. Everybody go up and unmute yourself so that we can say thank you,
Jess.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Thank you, Jess. You're awesome.
Marvelous.
Thank you.
Everybody will see you next month.